Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and our podcast is sponsored by Indiana Women's Action Movement. So today we're picking up on some news that came out not too long ago about the INCHI report, which is the Indiana Civic Health Index. And it really made some interesting notations about the way Indiana voters are participating in government, and the way all Hoosiers are participating in government. And so I'm really excited to have with me today Bill Moreau. He's a retired attorney who did not stop working. He and his wife created a 501c3 called the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation. And they also, he's a publisher of the Indiana Citizen, an online political news publication. So, and it's very good, by the way, very good. I really enjoy reading it. It's very timely and of course, nonpartisan, but very clear and accurate about what's happening in Indiana politics. And so, Bill, you participated in the press conference for the release of the Civic Health Index report, and you made lots of great comments along with the retired Supreme Court Justice, Indiana State Supreme Court Justice Randall Shepard, and I'm sorry, I have not remembered her name. She's from up in my area.
Ellen Zarletta, Professor Ellen Zarletta from IU Northwest.
Great, right. Yeah, super team. Super articulate and really brilliant and great work. So maybe we could start by your just telling us a little bit about the report, what you found. But what we're really going to want to talk about in length is voter registration and voter turnout, which is, of course, critical to great elections and fair elections in Indiana. So if you could tell us a little bit more about the report, that would be great.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you very much for the invitation. Right, this is a very, very timely discussion because the 2021 edition of the Indiana Civic Health Index was released just last week. And I'd urge you to go to our website, indianacitizen.org, and you'll see in very prominent in our place on our landing page, a summary of the report and links that will take you to the report itself. And if you're really a glutton for punishment, there's a link to the recording of the 48-minute press conference. So the 2021 edition is the fifth edition. The first one was 2011, then skipped to 2015, 2017, 2019, and 2021. The driving force behind the Civic Health Index has always been the Indiana Bar Foundation, led now for 20 years by a remarkable man by the name of Charles Dunlap is the president of the Indiana Bar Foundation. And I think it's safe to say that the Indiana Bar Foundation does more for the civic health of our state, civic life, civic literacy, than any other group in Indiana. Your viewers may be familiar with the We the People program, the mock trial program, just a fabulous organization that works day in and day out to try to improve Indiana's civic health. So Indiana was one of the first states to sign up for this study. Again, I said the first edition was 2011. We started working on the report as a full partner in the report in 2019. In fact, the 2019 edition really presented the sort of the factual basis, the information basis for the launch of our 501c3, the Indiana Citizen Education Foundation, because the results coming out of the 2019 report were just awful. And here we are 2 years later, and they're even worse, meaning, Indiana's just headed in the wrong direction on some of these very important metrics of civic health.
Right. So, and I looked at those numbers and everything, and it was, of course, sad. How many people in Indiana are not registered to vote?
Well, this is a fascinating discussion that we could have, and I'm not going to trust my memory here, so I'm going to go to my notes. But look, if you go inside the Secretary of State's website and look at the official reports, You'll see that in November 2020, you'll see the outcome of the 2020 election. And it will say that 4,751,370 Hoosiers were registered on election day of November 2020. Well, that number represents 95% of the voting eligible population in Indiana. And this is no criticism of this Secretary of State or any of her successors. Once in an early life, I was the Deputy Secretary of State when Evan Bayh was Secretary of State. So this has been a problem that plagues every state. The voter registration official numbers are inflated. People move, people die, people become otherwise ineligible. But the Indiana Civic Health Index, importantly, which goes to your question, says that 69.3% of the Hoosiers surveyed for that report said they were registered. Well, of course, the reverse of that, is about 31% who are not registered. And if you multiply that percentage time the voting age by the voting population, voting eligible population, you come up with more than 1.5 million Hoosiers who are not registered at all. So the number is probably someplace in between, right? But most importantly, of course, registration is that first vital, most important step you have to take in Indiana. And we have one of the earliest deadlines for a registration. Maybe someday we'll live long enough to see same day voter registration, which occurs in so many states. But the point being is step one is to get registered. And there is a lot of social science about what happens when somebody becomes a first-time voter. They're more interested and more motivated than maybe any time in their life to really get informed. So that very first vote they cast is really very well informed. So there's another sort of myth out there, is that why waste your time on the unregistered? Why waste your time trying to motivate those who don't participate, right? Shame on them, right? That's what the political class will say. Shame on them. It's not our fault. Shame on them. Well, this goes to some really fundamental notions of how you think about democracy. And I probably ought to take a breath there, or I can go on and on and on and on this topic.
And we'll get more into that education, because I want to talk about that too. I saw in the report the recommendation of making schools certified as, like STEM schools are certified as democracy schools or democratic schools. So I would love to hear more about that.
Not democratic, not in this state. Can't be called democratic school. Democracy
school. Thank you. So, but as to voter registration, there is a lot going on, and I'm wondering, if your group is, helping pull those groups together. So there's League of Women Voters, there's NAACP.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there's a group called Hope, which is new.
Yep, great group.
Yeah, all terrific. So, and I've done voter registration. I've been involved with the League of Women Voters for many, many years. And, it's hard. It is hard registering voters. And I'm wondering why all those groups coming together is not more successful in getting, more higher percentage of Hoosiers registered.
Well, COVID had a big impact on registration in 2020, and in fact, there was a couple of national pieces about the effect of COVID on traditional, clipboard style voter registration. So I'm going to lay a big compliment on the Indiana Secretary of State, and that is the Indiana Secretary of State's website is the most efficient way to register to vote.
It is, yes.
And I have registered, as you've registered, scores of people, setting up tables at the farmer's market, sort of thing. In fact, no one should ever do pen and ink and paper form registration in Indiana ever again.
I agree. Yeah.
The history of that is just awful to begin with, but it has more importantly been superseded by this really cool technology. And why is it so cool and why is it so effective? Because the state of Indiana already knows everything it needs to know about you in order to be qualified to register to vote, right? And that's why it's connected to your driver's license number, right? If you have a driver's license, you can register to vote in 5 minutes.
Right.
And you immediately get confirmation that you're registered. In fact, if I could go off on a tangent here, only a little bit, we already have same-day voter registration in Indiana. Don't tell the Secretary of State that, because she would, because that's not what it means, right? Same-day voter registration means that you can show up on election day and register and cast a ballot. We don't have that in Indiana, but we sure have the technology to do it. That technology would work as well on election day as it works a month before election day.
Absolutely. Right. And, and I would just want to throw it out there. IndianaVoters.com is where you go to access that system. So, and it is super easy. I agree. I never use the paper anymore. It doesn't make sense to use it. You can do it on your phone. Yeah, and I will say too that I'm discovering over my many years, great places to stand are outside of gas stations and dollar stores. I have had some good success there. So I recommend those locations. So we don't really have a good explanation for why, given all of these great groups out there, that we're not getting more full voter registration. And motor voter, too. I do voter registration. A lot of times, young people, they'll go, "Oh no, I'm not registered," and I'll look them up. I'm like, "Well, yeah, you are." They did it and they forgot because it's so easy to do it when you get your driver's license.
Exactly. And if I could put in a plug for registering high school seniors, which is something that the league has been very active in, depending upon the counties that are most active. In September of 2020, so right before the 2020 election, we released a study that public policy group at Tufts University had performed, in which they looked into voter registration files of 40 states and compared registration August 2020 versus November 2016, and they broke it out by age cohorts. The number of Hoosiers 18 and 19 years old in 2020, right? Had actually dropped 51% from just before the election in 2016. And we hit the panic button. We tried to get high schools to really get interested in it, and didn't get much traction there. But if I were emperor for a day, I would really focus on making sure nobody gets out of their senior year of high school without having the opportunity to register. Right?
Absolutely,
Notice
yeah.
I noticed I said opportunity. I wouldn't make it a requirement of graduation, right? That's, I think, a little too heavy-handed. But if you know how it works with young people, if it becomes the thing to do, in your high school, and shame on you if you're not registered. And it's so easy, right? It's technology that these kids are so familiar.
Yeah. So okay. So now that we're talking about school, let's talk about more of that education, the democracy education that you're promoting. The recommendations that ended up as part of the Indiana legislation that was passed in 2021 that required more civics education, a full semester in middle school. And but it doesn't start till 2023-24, that school year. But it sounds like we're getting ready. I wish it was starting now, frankly, but it requires more professional development. And of course, okay, this crazy bill that's in Indiana hasn't passed yet. And I still hold out hope that it's not. But we have to
I'm sorry, could you be a little bit more specific? Which crazy bill?
Doesn't narrow it down, not Chuck.
It doesn't narrow it down.
So, right. So, I mean, there's several versions. I think 1040 in the House or 1041 perhaps. Anyway, it limits what teachers can talk about as far as American history. They use terms like they're banning anti-American talk. And some of them even, some of those bills actually go so far as to say, well, you can, you're allowed to say that socialism and Marxism do not align with American principles. But they don't say anything about fascism and Nazism not aligning with American principles, which is a little frightening. But anyway, so I'm really worried that how this, I mean, that was such a success. I was just so happy when, and it was a Republican bill, and of course it was great that it got passed. That yes, we're going to have more civics education. Wonderful. But now this year we're having this kind of gag order put on teachers to limit their ability to talk about. I mean, this is civics, this is government, this is the history of government. And how will we teach civics under those circumstances?
Wow, that is a great question. I hadn't really given much thought to how that bill might affect civics education. But wouldn't it be wonderful if the legislation itself became the focus of a civics class, right? Meaning, let's talk about Constitution. Let's talk about the promise of America. And by the way, there is a word that ends in ISM called by the name of patriotism, right? I mean, in terms of how we talk about our country and its values in a loving, respectful way, which we ought to have sufficient information to create that kind of loyalty, affection for our country. Heck, I'm an Army brat, so you can imagine how I was raised. But at the same time, have a warts and all conversation about America. That is in the greatest tradition of what it means to be an American, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Eyes wide open about our hopes and aspirations as a country, how we haven't lived up to those aspirations, what a more perfect union might look like if we could work on these topics. Yeah, I think this legislation may find itself right smack dab, in a classroom. Let's have a discussion about this legislation and really what it means in terms of our basic small d democratic values.
That's right. So, and we know that this legislation is not unique to Indiana. There's many states, that are ALEC, is passing out the template.
There are these groups that just churn these model bills out, right?
Yeah. So this is happening other places. And I wonder if, on that topic, what are other states doing about their civic engagement? I suspect that your answer will include that many states are doing better at allowing voter access and ensuring more people have access to the polls. But what are, so if you compare, if everybody's passing these laws that are putting gag orders on teachers' discussion of American history, what's the other side of the coin on that? What are other states doing as to civic engagement and civic education?
Well, these states are much farther along than we are, okay? Because not only in terms of the pedagogy, what goes on in classrooms. And so, yes, thank you for highlighting that a lot of good came out of the 2019 Indiana Civic Health Index. This was the final report of the Civic Education Task Force, which was led by Lieutenant Governor Crouch. It was really a very blue ribbon commission. It turned into legislation, passed almost unanimously. Does create for the first time a middle school civics education requirement, because there was a recognition, thankfully, a recognition that we really needed to work on basic civics education in Indiana. Okay, all right, that's the K through 12 education component of it. Then there's what happens when you turn 18 and how a state views you and insofar as participation in the democratic process is concerned. So we, in fact, in the 2021 edition, we went so far as to look at the states that consistently were in the top 10 of states for registration and turnout. And there were 7 states that were there, time after time after time. And we set forth the policy choices, the public policy choices that have been made in those states, like automatic voter registration, meaning you interact with state government at some level, right? And you're immediately checked to see whether you're registered to vote, and you are automatically registered if you're not, unless you opt out. We have an opt-in system when you show up at the BMV. Same day voter registration is another policy that is common in these states, and certainly longer voting hours. There are a number of those policy choices. Indiana hasn't made a single one of those policy choices. In fact, to your earlier point, there's legislation. When you talk about the list of bad legislation, there's the bill that Representative Wesco is pushing, House Bill 1116, which explicitly, I guess you have to give him candor, some points for candor. He's pushing in order to discourage absentee voting and encourage people to show up and vote in person. That's a view of America that is, to me, strikingly small town 1950s. Everybody should show up to vote in person. And I say that with a level of respect, but it has missed dramatically the change in technology. And it also has missed what happened in 2020 in this very state, right? The parties got together in a rare moment of comedy and moved the primary from May to June. And it was a no excuse absentee voting election. Well, once the primaries were over, then that kind of went away. And it was decided that the November election would be, a regular election. Well, look what happened again. Large numbers of absentee. So people, the constituents of these representatives and senators are telling them, I'd like to be able to have the option of voting absentee if I can't show up. And oh, by the way, I can check that box, right? I can, by voting absentee, I can discharge my civic duty and get it behind me, right? And not have to worry about whether I get a flat tire on election day, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure, what the excuse for that is. I mean, it's clear that, discouraging voter turnout is the goal.
Look, let's just say it out loud, because it's, by the way, it's a mindset that both parties have. And I learned that the hard way when we were working on registration, education, and turnout in 2020. If you figured out a way to acquire and hold power, next step is perpetuating power. And whether you're a Republican who's figured out how to get power, or whether you're a Democrat who's figured out how to get power, you don't want first-time voters coming into the body politic, because you can't be sure how they will vote. The parties only want people showing up. They know in advance how they're going to vote. And that is just unhealthy.
It is absolutely undemocratic. So, yeah. So,
these people take oaths of office, right?
Right.
And swear that they're going to. It's not explicit in these oaths, but it's certainly implicit in the oath that by taking office, you're going to help perpetuate democracy.
Yeah.
That seems pretty fundamental to me.
Yeah, I know. I don't know where to go with all that. I'll ask you just to, check the box, but all those states that, that we looked at, I looked at in your report that showed all those other services, same day voter registration, longer hours, no cause absentee ballot voting. Are they reporting significant fraud as a result
Zero.
of these expansive?
Zero.
Yeah, so that's what. Yeah.
Is zero. I mean, look, I don't know which version of the big lie it is. There are so many, but One of them is that there's widespread voter fraud. Okay. Well, that isn't said about Indiana elections. No one would have the audacity to say that about the Indiana elections. I think you could count on one hand the number of criminal, outright criminal, fraudulent, illegal voting behavior in Indiana over the last 50 years, right? It's just not done.
Right.
And greater election security is the solution in search of a problem.
Absolutely.
And we have in Indiana really a very well developed system that that's highly localized.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right, and it involves so many people and so many good, honest people that outright voter fraud is just not a problem in our country.
Right. I mean, and I was so grateful to Republicans like never before in 2020 at the local level who, stood their ground and conducted those elections fairly and accurately and securely, and would not change their mind regardless of their party, the pressure from the higher ups in their party. That was just amazing to me. That was just such a
I couldn't
heartening
agree
moment.
with you more.
Yeah.
I was frustrated with some of the party regulars in terms of the way they really got in the way of our efforts and other efforts to register new voters and turn out first-time voters. But when it came to the actual conduct of the election, it was doggone near perfect in Indiana.
Yeah. And in a lot of places. I mean, most places.
Yeah, most
So,
places,
all right.
yeah.
So let's turn now to voter turnout. This is, the other really frustrating, difficult to crack nut in Indiana and in many places, I'm sure. But how many people were registered in 2020 and did not vote?
How many people were registered and did not vote? So, well, okay, here's that moment in which if we take the official voter registration numbers of 4,751,000 and the official turnout number 3,068,625, that would indicate that about 1,700,000 registered voters didn't vote. And that's how you get to 61% turnout.
Right.
And so that's a lot, right?
It is a lot.
Yeah.
So, and I know, the long game plan is the civics education that will hopefully instill some, motivation in people who are to get registered, and then those that are registered to go out and vote. But, what are the problems? What are the other things that we can do to address the low voter turnout?
Well, of course, contested elections matter.
Yes. Yes.
And that, I think, is why gerrymandering is arguably the most insidious and effective form of voter suppression ever devised by the mind of man, by deciding in advance who's going to win. Right? A third of the members of the Indiana House and Senate, a third, didn't have an opponent in the fall.
Yeah.
And the maps that were just drawn in September, which will go into effect for the 2022 election cycle, are a repeat of the maps that were drawn in 2011, and all with the intention of preserving the supermajorities in the General Assembly. We here in Indianapolis are seeing the same dance go on. I'm pointing east. On the east end of Market Street in Indianapolis is where the city county building where the city county council meets. And the Democrats in Indianapolis have an 80% supermajority in the council, 20 of 25 seats. And now they're embarked on a redistricting process for those 25 districts that is just completely mimicking what the Republicans did at the state level. Right. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? That that the parties, would fight and argue about so many things. So
Right.
we saw the Democrats in the legislature screaming about gerrymandering.
Right.
And the Indianapolis City County Council even passed a resolution in 2017, signed by the mayor, calling on the legislature to set up an independent redistricting commission.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now it's 2021, and it's time for the Democrats who control the council to redistrict to 25 seats. And when asked about, oh, okay, where's your independent redistricting commission? No. We don't have to do that. State law doesn't compel us to do that. Well, okay, we're not talking about something that state law requires, because look down in Monroe County and look in Bloomington, where they have voluntary citizen redistricting advisory, important word, advisory commission. No. That was then. This is now. We're just not going to do that. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, I mean, from a Democratic point of view, I mean, it's really shooting themselves in the foot, because for statewide races, so the gerrymandering in Marion County will result in lower voter turnout among Democrats, right? And it's like that in some of the other areas in Indiana. Lake County is, some northern Lake County, several districts that are like that. So, and they have some of the lowest voter turnout in these very Democratic districts, in St. Joe County and Lake County. And those are Democratic areas, and it's because they know they don't have to vote because the Democrat's going to win. So that's what happens. And same on the other side for the Republican districts. So for Democrats, though, to do that and really suppress voter turnout by gerrymandering Marion County is going to impact the election of Democrats at the statewide level. Because even though, you don't, in Marion County, you don't have to show up. You will get a Democrat representative. But what about U.S. Senator? What about Secretary of State? What about State Auditor, State Treasurer, Governor? All of these larger races. So it's really, more damaging to Democrats to behave this way in Marion County, ultimately, than Republicans. And I'm not sure why they don't see that.
You and me too, but it of course has to do with having acquired power in Marion County, and that is the limit of their focus. Can't see beyond the borders of Marion County. Don't need to, because it keeps us in power, and it's disheartening. Because you'd think that maybe one of the parties could stake out redistricting reform, as a motivating principle, right? But it's only a motivating principle when the other party's doing it, not when you're doing it.
Right. To pass the script,
just down Market Street, right?
Yeah.
Watching it unfold here in Marion County. It really looks like somebody took a box of records from the west end of Market Street State House and walked it up to the city county building and said, here's the script on how you do it and how you get away with it. And get away with it. This is a critical moment, critical component of this analysis is the United States Supreme Court has ruled there's no place in federal litigation for partisan gerrymandering cases.
Right.
It's a political question. It doesn't belong in a federal court, and it's just I understand how they get there. I understand how that case turned out the way it did as a lawyer, but it was the wrong result. It was a drum roll, please. It was 5-4.
Yeah. Well, and it's it's disappointing, and the impact that's having. There is, some theory of a cause of action that says, because gerrymandering to impact racial voting fairness is still not allowed. And there are some people I've heard trying to make the argument that, well, at this point, political partisanship aligns so closely with racial demographics that you can't really separate it. So, I mean, I don't know if that is getting anywhere, but anyway.
Well, right. I mean, you're a lawyer, so this is the okay. Let's sue under the Voting Rights Act theory, and the people I know, good lawyers who know that statute far better than I do, say that would be unlikely because you'd have to actually now, because the way the Voting Rights Act and civil rights litigation has unfolded over the years, you'd have to show a smoking gun, right? You'd have to find some record in which one of the map drawers says, we're gonna do everything we can to screw the African Americans in this district, and it's too hard to prove at this point. So, okay, great. So, so I do want to talk a little bit about the education component of your work. I was really excited to see the notion of that it came, was in so part of the legislation that caused, that created the task force, included this notion of democracy education in schools, and also put out this idea of schools being certified as democracy schools. And I wonder if you have any more details on that, because that's really an exciting proposition. I really don't, because the Bar Foundation has really taken the lead on that. Our contribution to civic education in Indiana is every day at indianacitizen.org. We get up every day with the goal of making sure that Hoosiers know as much as we can possibly produce about policies that affect our civic life. And we've had some success. We're now up to over 25,000 individual visitors a month. And I think we are making a contribution, and I'm delighted, Deb, that you're one of our readers. I mean, we really are trying to create sort of a one-stop shop for information and for engagement, right? You can register to vote on our site. You can learn about your legislator. We perfected in 2020 something we called a virtual ballot. Oh my gosh, was that a pain to create? But it's address based, right? And so right before the election, you can plug in your address, the names of everybody on your ballot, all the way down your ballot will appear. Okay, that's helpful. But then the next step, you click on the names and you'll go to unbiased information about the candidates, not information created by the candidates, information that has been created by professional journalists, summarizing the information about.
Well, that's great. And I have to give a call out to the League of Women Voters. They have a thing called a 411, vote411.org.
Vote 411.
When I was involved with the local league, those that like you get the headache. Yes, I did that headache. I was the one assigned to try to figure out this software and get the candidates to get their photos uploaded. And their system is exactly like what you say. You put in your address, it shows you your ballot, you click on the name of a candidate. But what they get is information that the candidate has provided. So
we had a long series of conversations with the league in 2020 to see whether we could get our models aligned, and we just couldn't. And I say that with a great deal of respect for the league, because what we took on was another order of magnitude of work and time and expense and whatnot. And the league's lawyer said, we'll never get sued. We just made ourselves, litigation proof, because we have just imported the information that the candidates have given us. And we said, okay, well, yeah, that's an approach. That's not our approach. And by the way, having both sets of information out there, of course, is just all the better for voters.
Right. So people can access that system on your website, right? The Indiana Citizen.
Yes. Of course, we're working hard to make sure it's set up for the May primary. Whoa, is that going to be a heavy lift? But it'll certainly be in place for the general election.
And so have you had any candidates who, don't like what you wrote about them?
Yes, yes.
How
And I
does that-
say that with great pride. We've in the 2020 cycle, I fielded some phone calls from old friends who, in one case, an incumbent, you love this, the incumbent didn't like the fact that we had given equal space to her opponent. And then I said, listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And right, somebody I've known for years, and she went, "Oh gosh, you're right. Bye." she realized what she was saying, right?
Yeah.
But in her mind, it just could not have been possible that her lengthy, career in public service, would have X words devoted to summarizing it, and her opponent, who'd really never done anything in his life, would have the same number of words devoted. But that was the point, right? That was what we were trying to do. And maybe she was complaining that we were giving her opponent more credibility than he deserved. She got 80% of the vote, so it all turned out.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, so but no real lawsuits, huh?
No. I can't imagine we would. Well, of course, as you know, as a lawyer, anybody with filing fee can file a lawsuit. But no, we those profiles are never going to cause us to be sued because they're just bulletproof factually.
Yeah. Well, and they're a public figure, so. Anyway, okay, great. Well, we're a little over time, but that's all right. So this was so much fun. I really enjoy chatting with you.
Oh,
about
me too. I'm surprised we haven't met before now, and I'm delighted we have met. And I know you're doing a lot of good work with your podcast. And by all means, ask me back. You may have detected I love talking about this, and I'm trying to get people fired up and agitated about this. We're trying to actually practice a form of what I call agitational journalism, meaning it's always factual, but we're trying to get information out that might actually piss some people off. And the people that we're trying to energize are really our fellow citizens who are not yet engaged in the civic life of our state.
Well, I would say that's what I find is that people here, they think this is just the way it is, and that this is the way it is everywhere. And so I think it's so important for you to be really enlightening people about how it is in other places, how much easier it is to get registered and how much easier it is to get out and get into the polls and vote. And people here they're just kind of used to it. They know that it's difficult, and they think that's just the way it is. So I think that's really important to say, lots of other people do a much better job than us, and we can change too.
Well, thank you. And, and I'll just close with this. We have suggested that any bill that touches on Title III of the Indiana Code at all ought to be analyzed through an initial screen. Is this bill likelier to encourage or to discourage a voter, right? Is it likely to encourage additional turnout or to discourage additional turnout? And if the answer is the latter, it ought to fail, right? You shouldn't go mucking around in the election code in this state until we can figure out a way to promote additional turnout.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, we have to end. And so thank you so much again for doing this, Bill. This has been a lot of fun, and I do hope we get to do this again.
Great, Deb. Take care.